The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Almighty God, you have set us in a community that reminds us every day just how diverse and how beautiful your creation is. Thank you for organizations like Bridges and for their story of reaching across the divides that we have built to separate us from each other and that serve to separate us from you. Come and be with us today. Teach us something new and inspire us in your Son's name. Amen. So when I arrived at Church of the Holy Communion 4 and change years ago, I was immediately introduced to our various ministry partners and the folks that we've been supporting for years and years and years. And one of those organizations is Bridges USA, which has a beautiful building downtown, was connected to the Episcopal Church in its founding, and has a former executive director, Jim Boyd, who's married to Martha Boyd, who's been a part of this community at Holy Communion. Recently, Hester and I went down to visit at Bridges and came to learn about some of the challenges that they're facing, that their good work is continuing to go on, and they actually invited us to come out to camp this summer to see their work in action, and I really could not have been more taken by the experience of seeing the Bridge Builders program at work. What I've learned through them is that one of the main challenges they're facing is getting ethnic diversity within their programs. And by that, I don't mean young people of color. I mean the people who are in my demographic and who tend to be Holy Communion's demographic. People ask me here at church all the time, what's something practical that I can do to address the race relations issue in Memphis, Tennessee? And my answer 100% of the time is get your teenagers or the teenagers in your life to participate in the Bridges program. It is designed specifically to help break down those barriers so that we can live in a different future than we have in the past. I am totally inspired by this program. I have never, ever given the Rector's Forum over to one of our partner agencies to make their presentation, and this is absolutely the exception that proves the rule. I'm going to introduce in a moment Cynthia Ham, the Executive Director of Bridges, and then at the end of our time today, Hester Mathis, our Associate Rector, is going to share a few words about her experience as a bridge builder and as a bridge building parent. So without further ado, Cynthia, welcome to Holy Communion.
To talk about an organization that is so important to Memphis. So just to make sure that I'm familiar with my audience, anyone who knows a child who has been through Bridge Builders, or if you're a parent or a grandparent of a bridge builder, raise your hand. That's great. I hope that they all had the kind of experience that Hester's going to tell you about. But I'll fill you in because we have really grown and developed a lot in the last 5 years when we underwent a major program expansion. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But first, I'm going to delve into the history for a moment. So in 1922, the organization was founded at that time by Calvary and St. Mary's as an opportunity to serve young women who suddenly found themselves in need. And from there, it grew to accept males as well in the program. And then it evolved into youth service, which some of you may know that Father Don Mowry ran for many, many years. And he developed a lot of programs for underserved youth using federal funding, and he was expanding and getting even a national footprint for that. Some of you may remember in the 60s and maybe the early 70s, the Father Don radio show, Talk It Out with Father Don, a beloved gentleman in this community. And then in 1988, Rebecca Webb Wilson, who is, you probably know, the daughter-in-law of Kimmons Wilson, the founder of Holiday Inns, and she's married to Spence Wilson Sr. She looked around at Memphis, having been taken on a tour of the entire city by then Mayor Morris, and recognized the divides in the community. And then she said to herself, my children who go to Briarcrest really are living in a bubble. They don't have any interaction with people not like them, and that's not good for this city. So not only for their benefit, but for all young people's benefit, she came up with this idea of pairing 20 students from Briarcrest with 20 students from the inner city at Northside for a week-long team building, trust building activities. And that was how Bridge Builders was born. So with those 40 students, and it was very successful, and she had taken this idea to Father Don at youth service, and they embraced the program and started growing it. Now the program that served those 40 students now serves 1,200 students in this year-round learning experience. So for those of you who may not have ventured downtown in the last 13 or 14 years on the north end of downtown, this is our building. It was designed by Coleman Coker, who was a Memphian at the time. It is an incredible learning facility. It was the first green commercial building in Memphis. It was designed specifically to embrace youth. In fact, it was so much designed with that in mind that while it doesn't have any right angles in the building, because it was recognized that the youth's brains, the frontal cortex, are still developing at that age, and this not having right angles is a way of stimulating that. Therefore, when adults walk in that building, sometimes they can feel a little off, like something's not quite right. But we're right across the street from St. Jude, if you the entrance there, if you want to kind of use that as a mental marker. North Parkway, turns into A.W. Willis, and that's the street that continues on to go over to Harbortown on Mud Island. So our mission is really simple: to unite and inspire diverse young people to become confident and courageous leaders committed to community transformation. So there are 3 parts to that we hold ourselves accountable to and measure our outcomes by. The first one, of course, is diversity. And we're not talking just about racial diversity. We're talking about socioeconomic, religious, all kinds of diversity. And then the second piece that we are measuring our accountability with is the leadership development. And so, of course, diversity is a big part of that. But there's also other things to learn, like when you speak up and when you need to step back. And the grade levels that we're reaching all across 7th through 12th graders, everyone can benefit from having their inner leader brought out. And then finally, the third piece of the equation is community transformation. So what we try to instill through this program is that once you have found your inner leader and you have sort of become awakened to the greater world around you, and that you realize that it's not just all about yourself anymore, but somehow we're all interrelated, and our success really relies on one another, then they begin thinking about community, and in particular Memphis and the greater Memphis area, because we're very contextual in opening the young people's eyes to the challenges that Memphis faces, the challenges and the opportunities. And many of them, when they graduate from high school, say, I was going to go away and leave Memphis forever because I didn't really see any hope, and I didn't feel very engaged. But through this program, they do see that hope, and they do feel that connection to the community. And many say, once I go away to college, I can't wait to get back. And that's not me just saying that, but we do have lots of anecdotal evidence about that. So what we like to do when we tell our story is recognize the fact that the young people who are in the program do a better job than any one of us could do. So I'm going to show you a short video that really hones in on their perspective as they are going through the week-long summer conference.
It's a feeling of community when you come to Bridges.
It just taught me so many things that not only that I wouldn't learn at school, but even outside of school, and about the community of Memphis.
I got service hours, I got volunteer hours, but I didn't feel like that was enough.
I think I just wanted to get involved in the community.
I knew a few people that had done it, and they were all like, you have to do it, it's so awesome.
I wanted to be bigger than me, so I was like, oh, why not join Bridge Builders?
Coming in, everyone is kind of feeling the same way, a little apprehensive about meeting new people.
I was worried about being in a situation where there would be so many different people there.
I don't know you, you don't know me. Everyone was kind of nervous to talk to each other, so it was breaking that barrier.
I thought it was extremely nerve-wracking coming here and knowing nobody.
We're like strangers.
You circle up with your color group.
So I'll just be myself, and hopefully that gets me to talking to other people.
We did 1-minute intros and then we played games together.
That's when everyone was like, shoot, now we actually have to work together for a common goal.
They seemed like really small activities that have nothing behind it, but you would sit down and they would ask you, what did we just do?
It was cool to see everyone's different perspectives because some ideas I would never think of.
So everyone is really understanding and is trying harder to get along.
It was so neat to me that I got to meet all these people from different backgrounds, people all over Memphis, and it was awesome.
And I know there's interests that we're going to share and use that to start a conversation.
We begin to open up with each other and feel comfortable. And Bridges gives you that environment where you feel safe and comfortable to talk about your life or any struggles you've gone through.
And it's definitely a space that I find much more accepting. In school, there's people who judge you, there's people who are going to say things about you.
And then I went to Bridges and I learned that it's a much different story.
We have stuff in common, and it's just the right conversation that it takes to do that.
It's nice being here where people will respect me and treat me equally for the crazy person I am.
We just talked about our struggles and what we have to go through every day.
I realized there were some things that some people had gone through that were very different from what I had done.
We all spilled our secrets and really saw that, everyone struggles and you're not alone. It was so cool because not that I thought they would be super different, but they were just a lot like me, and that really surprised me. But it was really interesting to learn, and they loved to see what I thought.
I love learning about those differences that we have because we come from different backgrounds and because we are diverse. I also love learning about the similarities because it shows how we can connect to each other even though we're different.
We talked about diversity within communities and how to communicate effectively within different groups of people.
I think Bridge Builders has helped all the people here build up a certain level of respect.
And it's cool because what they said, I know I will use as a future reference wherever that may lead.
It was really exciting for me because I got to observe other people and see how other people thought, and it also influenced the way I thought or think about things now.
I've learned a lot of different ways to know people and get to know them, and that kind of changed throughout the week.
Before I became a bridge builder, I was not the person I am today.
You leave Bridges such a more confident person.
I used to be much more closed, but I feel that each year helps me grow a bit more as a person.
It just gives me a different perspective. I look at people differently and I look at life different now.
The program is bettering me as an individual. Bridges has changed my life.
I've come across a wide variety of different types of people from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different sexualities, genders, religious beliefs. I realized that a bridge builder is someone who, regardless of where they come from, who they are, what they look like, who they love, what they think about, as long as they can support others and be able to receive support in a positive way, then that's the true meaning of what a bridge builder is.
I have recommended it to so many of my friends, and I absolutely love it.
I love that I got involved with Bridges.
I can never come to a place that's going to top this.
Love the program, it's great.
It was just the best week of my life. I loved it.
I am a bridge builder. I am a leader who can lay aside individual, social, economic, and cultural differences to work for the benefit of all.
Please give them a round of applause.
So hopefully that gave you their perspective. It is quite powerful. And at the end of that week of summer conference, that's really only the beginning, by the way. They have to attend other trainings and do other community projects throughout the entire academic year. So it's a full, robust, year-round program. But at the end of that first week at summer conference, when it's just so intense, which is what Reverend Webb got to see in action out at For the Kingdom. By the way, the 11th and 12th graders actually stay in residence with one another, and we're very intentional about pairing different people from different backgrounds with each other for roommates. And those late night conversations where some very courageous conversations take place, I think are probably the most intense out of the entire week. But at the end of that first week, there's an induction ceremony, and they cite that pledge that you just heard. And we hear from different individuals selected by their peers from that week really talk about how transformational the experience was for them. And that is the key word that they so often use, is transformation. That's not us saying that, that's them saying it. And they say, you know, it made me look at the world differently. I had a parent, white parent from the suburbs, say, my daughter is not the same person that she was, and it has changed the conversation around our dinner table. So if we can sort of permeate this community with those kinds of conversations, then you can see how exponentially it can make change throughout Memphis. So this is the Bridge Builders Pledge. I'm a bridge builder. I'm a leader who can lay aside individual, social, economic, and cultural differences to work for the benefit of all. And they take this pledge very, very seriously. It's printed on the back of their t-shirts, and then at the induction ceremonies, they say it with their eyes closed. So we are very precise, I guess would be a good word, in how we go about recruiting across the city and the county and really the greater Memphis area. We connect with sponsors in schools, mainly. That's our main source of recruitment. So we have something like 160 different schools currently enrolled right now, with students currently enrolled in the program right now out of that 1,200 I mentioned. And then they commit themselves to helping us get the word out and to really looking out to identify young people they think would be really get a lot out of this program. And then they nominate those students. They have to apply. We get a lot more applications than we have room for. We get about a third more than we can accommodate. And as Reverend Webb alluded to, we have about 4 times the demand from the African American community than we do the Caucasian and other communities. That's why it's so important for us to try to overcome those everyday obstacles that and really competition for a young person's discretionary time. So a lot of young people, you know, who are very privileged, they have a lot of choices during the summer. And they may be traveling with their parents. They may have a lot of sports activities going on. I mean, there's just a lot. And a lot of the independent schools have developed leadership programs. That's something, an added value that they want to provide for their students. But I would say that even in those leadership programs and those very fine independent schools, they're still in a bubble because there is not the diversity of backgrounds represented in those schools in that training. And I know that many independent schools have worked very hard to diversify, and I'm not suggesting that that is not very real, but it's still diversity, not just in race, but also in socioeconomic, religious, and other backgrounds. The students, because we want to make sure that we're accessible to those who may not have been chosen or who doesn't have an active school sponsor, they can also apply online. In all program levels, and I know I've been talking about the 1,200 because that's the year-round legacy program, we do have about 6,000 youth that we provide programming to throughout the year. And this is from 129 different schools in 60 different zip codes. So there are 3 program levels. I'm going to just do this very quickly because it's a lot to absorb, but all of that information is in our little annual reports that you have. The first level was developed 5 years ago in order to try to introduce more young people to the concepts of bridge builders. And so these are one-time workshops and special events that students can come to, or we will go into schools and do. And then Collaborate is that year-round program that I've been talking about, a year-round training. That's the legacy program that Becky founded. And then finally, Change is the deepest level. There are 39 fellows, interns, in that program this year. It was piloted 5 years ago with only 12 students in it. And these are students who have really awakened that passion within themselves to say, gee, I want to go deeper. I want to make change now. I don't want to wait till I grow up to make change. I want to work on something now. So these 39 students are divided into 5 cohorts, and they have all opted to choose a particular area of interest that they want to focus on. One is youth and police relations. One is gender and sexuality policy in schools. Another one is education reform. And another one, I'm trying to think, I may circle back to it, but you get the point. And they have self-selected these areas. Now, when they talk about making change, as you can see, these are very deep and systemic challenges, and they take it on, and they learn how to change policy, to advocate to policymakers, and let their voices be heard. It's a long, complicated process, and they recognize that, and they're taking it on. Another one is criminal justice reform as it relates to young people. I heard a presentation just the other day from that cohort talking about solitary confinement being used on young people, 13, 14, 15 years old, 16 years old, put away in solitary confinement for some infraction they made within the prison system, sometimes 6 months at a time, and they are locked in that cell for 23 out of 24 hours a day. So that's just another example. So I'd like to open it up for questions, and I think, Hester, maybe we can tag team this, and you can talk about your experience, and then we can open it for questions together. How is that?
What drew me to the Bridge Builders program, which I'll date myself in saying that it was not Bridge Builders when I was a youth yet, but that we can often strive for certain ways that we want to change our community. We can strive for ways that we want to be and things that we believe in, but it's hard knowing how. What are the tangible small steps that I can take in my everyday life to actually do that? I can say that I am going to love my neighbor, and I am going to strive to understand the other, and I am going to work on race relations in Memphis. But until I'm thrown into a room that's made of other people, it's hard to know what those first steps look like. So Bridge Builders is a place that gives our youth a chance to practice, a chance to take risks. I don't know if you remember, but when Matthew gave his presentation on that immersion program that we did this summer, he said, you've got this, this green area, and that's your comfort zone. And then we've got this next circle, which is our being able to take risks, but in a safe environment. And that's what Bridge Builders provides for the youth of our city, is that area to stretch ourselves, to take risks, to kind of try some things out. Some of them work, some of them don't. And we learn in an environment that is safe and is going to help us navigate those waters. When Neely went through Bridge Builders a couple of summers ago, my daughter, right after her 7th grade year, she came home every evening exhausted, absolutely and totally exhausted. It's like her sentences didn't even make sense anymore. And it's because it's hard work. It's a lot of hard work. I think the reason that we have more demand for this program for the marginalized sections of our community is that they are forced to step out of that comfort zone all the time. But a lot of our children are not, and they need that experience, and it's hard for them to go through that experience, and they learn what it feels like. They also learn how to make it better. Some of you all in the communicator saw that we were in a doctor's office not long ago, and a Muslim family walked in, and Neely went right over and was talking to them, and I just assumed they were a St. Mary's family. And she said, oh no, she was in my Bridge Builders group. And that's the thing, is that whether you're in the independent school system or in the public school system or the county schools or in this zip code or that zip code, they are making connections all across the city in places where their paths normally would not cross. And they're learning how to do that in ways that in our baptismal vows we say that we will respect the dignity of every human being. And that's what Bridge Builders gives to our city. And as Cynthia was saying, they come home and they talk about it with their families. They talk about it with their youth groups. And our families and our youth groups and our school groups and all of those circles in which we work together, they're all made stronger by this experience. So if you have a young person in your life, or if you know of one in this parish that you think, wow, I could really see that being a wonderful experience for them, let us know, because what I didn't know until this year is that just as schools have the opportunity to nominate youth, so do clergy. And so as a church, we can nominate our youth for this program, and Emma Gamble is proof of that. She went this summer. Avery Walker, Evelyn Marshall McGahee, and they were all ones that Holy Communion sent to be a part of this group. So be thinking, be brainstorming, and be reaching out and talking it up, because when our youth participate in this program, we're all made stronger. So now I'll open up the floor for questions and answers.
I'm wondering if the Gambles might like to share their child's experience or your own reflections about the experience.
You know, we do think we provide our children with different experiences and opportunities and viewpoints, but until you live it, until you are in a situation or in an environment that encourages that, you know, it's hard. It's like telling someone how something tastes. Until you experience it yourself, it's hard to really comprehend what these various students are dealing with from across the city. Excuse me, I had a cold. Emma also came home exhausted because it is a very engaging at all different levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, and it's been a wonderful experience and something that has created a better rounded school experience, as well as for our community as well. So it's been wonderful, and we look forward for her to.
I also wanted to point out, you saw a lot of those exercises that they were doing in the programs. It was, all very interactive. That's all part of the formula, if you will, for stimulating the young people's thinking and problem-solving skills and critical thinking skills. And at the conclusion of each one of those exercises, they circle up back in their groups and they say, what did we just do? And they reflect on what the purpose of that particular exercise was. And so when they emerge from the program, they have many of the characteristics that big global companies like Google advertise for: collaboration, creativity, critical thinking. Those are the 21st century learning skills that we're all wanting our young people to have the benefit of to succeed in life in this global world. So enough about that. So Stephanie, you have a question? Great. So the enrollment period opens in November. I don't have the exact date this year, but it'll be on our website. And it concludes in April. We do encourage people to apply earlier rather than later. And early applications do get some preference. So November to April, and then they are notified in early May, and then the programs start and ripple throughout the summer from June till the end of July by grade levels. So the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders come to Bridges every day for a week, and the 11th and 12th, the 7th through 10th graders come every day for a week to Bridges. About 100 per week are coming through. And then the 11th and 12th graders stay in residence. The 11th graders at University of Memphis campus this past year, the 12th graders at For the Kingdom, which is more of a retreat setting. That was more than you asked, but what other questions do we have? Absolutely. So first and foremost, I really do think that this program, for those who are deeply committed to what we've taught and what they've learned, is that they do feel more engaged in the city, and they are more likely to stay here or return here after they go off to college and maybe even a job somewhere else for a while, because they feel the tug. You know, Memphis is fairly easy to make change in. It's a really accessible city, and I think that they feel that. But to your point, the question about what are the longitudinal statistics look like for the impact this program has on young people's lives and the decisions that they make, we have actually launched a longitudinal study. We've had to go way back to 1988 and go through records before they had email addresses, and when we have students' addresses from when they were living at home with their parents and now they're in their 40s. So we have to track all of these young people down, which has been a real feat, and it's a work in progress to do that. And then we're measuring, we're asking them to fill out a survey at age 21 and age 25 so that we can look at this longitudinally. And again, what we want to know is around those three outcomes. Do I have more diversity in my life? Do I have really true diverse set of friends, for example? Am I in a leadership role, or am I building towards being in a leadership role because of this experience? And third, how civically engaged am I? Did I vote in the last election? So there are those kinds of indicators that we use. But again, statistically, we don't have the actual statistically accurate data yet, but we do have lots of other anecdotes about youth who feel so strongly about this program. A lot of our facilitators are Rhodes College students, and many of them are from out of town. And between the experience that they get at Rhodes being engaged in the community and the experience of being a facilitator at Bridges, they just think Memphis is the coolest place in the world, and they like to stay. So there's all kinds of ripple effects. Yes, ma'am. And we're still in touch with Father Don. I check in with him and go sit at his knee from time to time, and I love the way he thinks. He thinks like an executive director, because he's always talking to me about ways of raising money. And you know, that's just, he's an incredible man, as is Jim Boyd. For those of you who know Jim, he was at the organization for 15 years and really laid this foundation that I'm just able to fortunately just build on, including that incredible building that he and Becky and others raised the money to build. What other questions? Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. So the year-round program costs Bridges $1,000 a student to do. So, but we don't charge any student that full $1,000. There is a fee, but it's scaled to household income. So the lowest payment is $100, and again, that's year-round training, including that camp or conference. And then the highest level is $500. And if a student is accepted on his or her merit, but then we learn that they don't have the ability to pay, then they're not going to be turned away. Yes, thank you. The Latino community is also a very important part of this equation. As you probably would know, it's a particularly sensitive time right now, and there's a lot of unique challenges in that community because of all of the fear that is so persistent for all the reasons. But we do work very hard. We have a Spanish-speaking recruitment video Our VP of programs speaks Spanish. We have Spanish-speaking facilitators in the summer, and we've translated all of our promotional materials so that it can be more accessible. Great. So Jane was asking about these change fellows and the types of policy level challenges that they're trying to solve. So the first example that comes to mind was in the very first year, in the pilot year in 2012, the students, they interview their peers throughout all the city to learn what their concerns are, what are their greatest concerns. And most of the time, the students tie their concerns back to some kind of policy in the school system and or how a particular policy is enforced. So they decided to undertake, as the city and the county schools were merging, and they recognized that there was no formal channel for the school board, the new school board, to have youth voice in the decision-making process. They advocated for and crafted a policy for a student congress that would be representative of all of the students throughout the system. And there were some independent school students in that cohort too, and this was really a public school thing, but they were all about it. And then in the second year, and they worked hand in hand with the school board administration. They called, and Billy Orgel got a call saying, you know, I'm a bridge builder and I want to come interview you about this. I mean, they were one-on-one singling out the board members to make sure they understood their concerns and their platform. And so in the second year of their work on that, it was passed unanimously by the Board of Education. And now they are paying attention to how it is implemented. You know, we have looked at this challenge in so many different ways, and there's so many nuances to this. I think that what we've come to the conclusion of is that it's really a matter of priority for the young people. They have to choose. I mean, if they, and I know downtown is also a little bit of a challenge just because of the sheer location, but if they can make time to go to a Grizzlies game downtown, they could probably carve out 3 hours during the week as they're going, you know, throughout the school year. That doesn't totally address your question, but I feel like the challenges that would be inherent in trying to accommodate all of those different schedules is tougher than trying to identify the students that recognize the need for this type of training. And it is because, and I will say too, about the ratio of the demand to from the African American community is not just the marginalized students. I mean, this is all African Americans, and so it's not just a economic thing of privilege and marginalized. It's a mix, but still, the race is the most obvious indicator when you get a group of people together, and so it's a particular challenge. And in this town, when there's an African American majority anywhere, there is usually some kind of tipping point that, in my experience, I've seen that white people then kind of self-select out and say, well, you know, that's not really for me. And it's easy to default to that because you go where you feel most comfortable. So I think there's a little bit of that going on. There's just a lot, and there's so many different factors.
So I very much relate to your question here because it was not easy to make time for bridge builders in our daughter's schedule. I will say that Mario Hendricks, who is the head of kind of helping them get through that year-long collaborate and very accessible every time I had a question about anything, worked with our busy schedule. If Neely made 2 of the events and we just couldn't fit that third one in that semester, if that was a community action piece, I was able to say, you know what, she might not have made it to this community action piece, and we're having trouble fitting it in this month. But we did spend a day down at More Than a Meal with Holy Communion. And we did spend the family service day at MIFA. And he was able to kind of work with me and say, okay, you know, let's try to make it to the Bridge Builders event next semester. But, I mean, they understand that we're all very busy, and in this day of over-programming for all of our youth, it is hard work, not just on the youth, but on the parents, to try to find a way to make it work. I think, you know, when you do make that extra push, it comes back to you.
Grade generally has about 2 different weeks that they could be slotted into. So if the week that we slot them into doesn't work, perhaps the following week would, and we try to work with those who are accepted around those 2. Thank you for saying that. I will tag on to that and say we have a video clip. And by the way, all of our videos are on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Bridges or Bridges USA, and you can find a lot more and a lot of different, targeted to a lot of different audiences. But in one of those, Rabbi Michael Greenstein said, you know, the thing about Bridge Builders is it's relational. That when you're sitting next to someone not like you, and you're looking them in the eye and having a one-to-one conversation, there's no room for stereotyping. And that is part of the magic of the Bridge Builders program. Well, thank you so much for having me here today and for inviting me, Reverend